This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
We have some inspiration for congregations today on Family Life News. I'm Greg Gillespie, and our guest today is Charlie Cotherman. He is on the religion faculty at Grove City College, which also operates a Center for Rural Ministry. And so we are talking to a lot of churches in small towns and rural areas that some of them been around a century or two or longer. Charlie, we welcome you here, and I'd love to find out a little bit, first of all, what does the Center for Rural Ministry at Grove City, what are you centered on? What are your big projects to help the local churches?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to talk about it. So one of the things we realized a few years ago when we launched the pilot program in 2019 that eventually became the Center for Rural Ministry was that as a Christian liberal arts college in a rural area, we have resources that a lot of the area doesn't have, whether it's faculty or, just connectional power with churches and the ability to convene and bring people together. So we thought, how can we connect college, church, and community for the good of rural congregations? So we started by having affinity groups help pastors connect with each other that would, kind of resource pastors, but also help us learn about life on the ground in small places and small churches. I'm a small church pastor myself, so I understand some of it, but, every context is different. The other thing we realized over time was, one of the resources we had that we found churches really were interested in is students, and so as the project continued, we found that we could connect students to smaller churches and small places. And this was a beautiful thing where the students would catch a vision for, what the kingdom work God was doing in small places and small churches. And the churches would be encouraged by the kind of youthful exuberance of the students. So those are the kind of two main foci where we're connecting students to small churches and we're also connecting pastors to each other and to our faculty.
Obviously, there is no one-size-fits-all answer to this question, but could you speak to us a bit about the broad trends? What is happening in small town and rural churches these days as you make your networking and your conversation with these folks? What are the biggest issues that are unique to the rural churches?
The way I think about this is what people think about when they think of small churches is often older congregations that might be facing questions of their long-term vitality. How do we get the next minister in? Can we find a minister? And that is a segment of the rural church, which is absolutely true. And so we're trying to connect those churches and see what we can do to help in some of those cases. But the other thing I would say is, the rural church in a lot of ways is actually healthier than we think or healthier than the stereotype goes. There are some amazingly vibrant churches in small places. They might be churches of 50 that are vibrant. They might be churches of 350 that are vibrant. I always try to remind people, and especially students who might have a stereotype about rural churches. Honestly, the rural church there's no one rural church. It's a wide variety. And you can really flourish in a lot of different kinds of settings in rural America.
We're talking with Charlie Cotherman, who directs the Center for Rural Ministry at the Grove City College in western Pennsylvania. Are successes and contentment and faithfulness, are they defined differently if you are in a smaller community than if you were in a bigger downtown church or in a suburb of some big metro area?
A great question, and one we need to wrestle with, or else we're going to set ourselves up for failure. So one of the things we have to just face being kind of, 21st century Americans is that people judge success by big. Bigger is better. The reality is that's not how God judges success. So God thinks in terms of faithfulness. He thinks in terms of the virtues, the fruit of the Spirit. And so one of the things I think rural churches need to do is to remember that the categories of success the world gives us are not necessarily stemming from God. And so where those aren't aligned with the kingdom, we need to be very careful. So things that the rural church would value would be this kind of stability over time, intergenerational connectedness. And these are beautiful things that we see in the church through history.
As your center and the people that you send out, getting groups of church leaders together to talk about things, what are the biggest issues that are unique to the churches that are part of what you are doing with your ministry of empowering ministry?
One of the biggest issues is an issue of how we tell the story. So a lot of times people don't have a vision for what's possible in rural areas. And so if we tell a story that's all about decline, that's all about brain drain and demographic shifts that are in a negative direction, economic scarcity, I think it misses something. You know, the God of the universe is present everywhere, including the smallest town and the most rural village that we can think of. And so if God is present there, there is hope wherever that is. And so I think it's getting people to reimagine what's possible, what the God of the universe might be doing in their midst, and then just joining him in that.
One thing that obviously has transitions, sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. We are in a place where there is a significant shortage of clergy that crosses a lot of denominational and historical lines. It is particularly a challenge for small and mid-sized churches because there are just not pastors to go around. But does that also give opportunities to re-envision what the local church membership can do in shaping a church? A pastor comes in maybe for a year or two, it might be 3, 5, 7, but the people are the ones who stay. And that really is a strength of the small churches, that the larger programmatic kind of churches are really staff-centered and clergy-centered. Talk with us about what you see, how that is a benefit to have the people of the church leading and creating the vision for the church.
What's going to happen then is your church is going to be contextualized to your community if it's folks from the community who are shaping the vision over years. And I think that's an important thing. You know, if God wanted one big macro kind of corporate church, that's what he would have given us, but he didn't. He gave us relationship first with him and then with others. And so it was always contextualized. And so that's the thing that, you know, local congregations and folks that have been community members over the long haul bring to small churches is the sense of this is the church for this community, and God might call us to do things in a certain way for this specific community. So I think that's a beautiful thing.
Stick around. There's more encouragement from Charlie Cotherman. This is Inspiration for Congregations from Family Life News. We're talking with Charlie Cotherman, who is on the religion faculty at Grove City College. He directs their Center for Rural Ministry. I've asked you a lot of questions about things, but let me throw this wide open. What have we not talked about as far as what you're discovering in the churches you work with through the Rural Ministry Center? What's the untold story there?
One of the things that we didn't touch on yet is loneliness. You know, I think loneliness is something that obviously the entire country is dealing with now, that clergy deal with in a special way because of what they have to carry. And then if you are far from other members of the clergy or in other members of your denomination, for instance, the closest pastor in the denomination I serve in is over 2 hours away from where I live in rural northwestern PA. Loneliness is something that you have to be intentional about working against because it will creep in. And so that's one of the reasons why we are doing things with pastor affinity groups, you know, where we're connecting pastors from, you know, southwestern New York, western PA, eastern Ohio, northern West Virginia, into these kind of regional affinity groups where they can connect every month or every other month with folks who are doing some of the same things and, you know, share stories and learn from each other, because loneliness is a thing that is very real in the rural church.
Before we close out with you, Charlie, I want to give you a chance to offer a word of hope to people who are either leaders or members of these kinds of congregations. Can you give us some sampling of churches that have found something that has been very meaningful or very transformational? Where are some signs of hope in the churches you work with?
Yeah. One of the things, you know, that you when you work with churches and students, one of the things that gives me hope is kind of seeing students come back from places like, there's a Methodist church in Kane that the students have just really enjoyed working with that pastor, or another one down in Fombell, which is just a little south of Grove City, where they go and they see these churches involved in their community doing like hands-on work. They see leaders who are very much full speed ahead because they believe that God's doing great things. And the students come back and say, wow, this isn't what we actually expected. We expected to just kind of go in and paint some walls and, hear some kind of stories about how things used to be good in the old days, but like God's doing stuff now. And so as we see like pastors who really care, congregations who are doing great work, and then young people catching the vision, I have a lot of hope for what can happen in the region and the rural church in general.
We call this inspiration for congregations. There may be some listeners who are inspired and want to find out more about your Center for Rural Ministry, the research and the projects you've been working on, might want to get connected. Can you give us some information on how people can find out more or get plugged in to what you're doing?
Absolutely. So one of the best ways is to go to our website, www.ruralministry.org. You can find all kinds of things there from our affinity groups. You can apply if you're a pastor or even a lay leader. We're going to launch an affinity group for lay leaders who want to help their churches think through special needs ministry in early 2025. And we're excited about that. We're on social. We're on YouTube. You can find videos. So there's a lot out there about what we're doing. We have a blog, so on our resource tab, and that'll put you in touch with us. We'd love to hear from you.
We will link to ruralministry.org from the Family Life News podcast page as well. Our guest, Charlie Cotherman. He directs the Center for Rural Ministry, which is a regional outreach of Grove City College in Grove City, Pennsylvania. I'm Greg Gillespie, Family Life News.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.